The interview began smoothly, composed and professional, until an unexpected voice interrupted from the shadows. When Melania Trump suddenly interjected during Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's live interview, no one anticipated the intensity that would follow. What happened next left the former First Lady unsettled and the audience silent. The cameras were already rolling under bright studio lights, casting a steady glow over the set. Sitting confidently, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett was in the middle of a passionate statement about accountability and the misuse of power. Her words carried conviction and precision. "The truth is, we can't keep pretending that some people haven't benefited from staying silent," she said. "When power shields the privileged and punishes the outspoken, there's a real problem." The interviewer, an experienced host familiar with tense political exchanges, leaned in to respond, but was abruptly stopped. "Excuse me." "Stop right there." The firm voice cut through the room like a blade. The sound didn't come from the stage, but from just off camera. Producers sat up in surprise. Cameramen turned their lenses. Even the crew, typically composed, froze in place. Jasmine turned slightly toward the sound. From behind one of the curtains, Melania Trump stepped into view, poised, composed, and dressed in a sharp white suit. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the tension in the room. Every gaze turned toward her as she walked forward with slow assurance. It wasn't a casual entrance. It was an interruption. Deliberate or emotional, no one could tell. What was clear was that Melania Trump's unannounced appearance during a live interview with a Democratic Congresswoman had caught everyone off guard. The interviewer cleared his throat. "Mrs. Trump, you're not on today's schedule." Melania replied evenly. "No, I am not. But I was watching, and I couldn't let that comment go unanswered." Jasmine remained composed, though her expression tightened slightly. She turned fully toward Melania. "And which comment would that be?" Melania took another step closer, hands loosely clasped. "You said silence protects power. That people like me benefit from silence. That's unfair." The studio fell silent except for the hum of the lights and the faint buzz of microphones. No one moved. Jasmine responded steadily. "My point was about systems, how silence can become a strategic tool, especially for those with platforms others can only dream of." "I understand what you meant," Melania said softly but firmly. "But you talk as if I chose comfort. You don't know what choices I made or what I gave up." Jasmine leaned forward slightly. "Maybe not, but I do know this. When you stand beside one of the most powerful men in the world and remain silent as families are torn apart and women are disrespected, silence becomes a choice." Melania didn't reply immediately. For a moment she seemed taken aback, not by anger, but by the precision of Jasmine's words. Jasmine spoke not with hostility, but with conviction, and that clarity made the exchange all the more striking. The host tried to ease the situation. "Ladies, perhaps we can—" Neither woman acknowledged him. Jasmine continued, "Throughout my career I've been interrupted, labeled as too emotional, too aggressive, too much. Yet I'm still here, speaking not only for myself, but for every woman told to smile and stay quiet while injustice unfolds." Melania straightened. "I did what I believed was right." "And so am I," Jasmine replied. The tension was no longer uncomfortable. It was charged. Two women from vastly different worlds, facing each other in a raw, unscripted moment. The studio crew watched, frozen in place, realizing they were witnessing something rare. Not a staged debate, but an unfiltered exchange between two public figures. The interviewer glanced between them, sensing the discussion wasn't over. What no one realized, not even Melania, was that by stepping in to defend her silence, she had opened the door to accountability in a way no one had dared before. Jasmine didn't move from her seat. Her tone didn't rise. She simply locked eyes with Melania, unmoved. The weight of the moment wasn't just about two individuals. It symbolized two contrasting experiences and beliefs colliding live on air. The host, caught between them, tried once more to mediate. "Perhaps we should—" Jasmine raised a hand, quiet but commanding. "I won't be spoken over today," she said firmly. "Not by a man, and not by you, Mrs. Trump." Melania lifted an eyebrow but maintained her composure. I'm not here to argue. I came because you said something unfair, and I felt I had the right to respond, Melania said calmly. Jasmine gave a faint, unimpressed smile. Unfair? That's an interesting word from someone who held one of the most privileged positions in the world, and stayed mostly silent for 4 years. I spoke up when it mattered. Really? Jasmine asked, tilting her head. Was the time not right when families were being separated at the border? Or when your husband insulted women, mocked veterans, and questioned a black president's citizenship? How many right times did you let pass? The tension deepened. This was more than discomfort. It was a reckoning between two women shaped by entirely different experiences of power, race, and silence. Melania remained composed, though her hands clasped tightly. You don't know what I went through. I was criticized for everything. My accent, my past, my choices. I'm not saying that was fair, Jasmine replied, rising from her seat. But when you have a platform that large, silence isn't protection. It's participation. The room went still. Jasmine stepped forward, not hostile, but firm. I grew up being told to stay quiet, to wait my turn, to not make noise. I didn't. I stood up, ran for office, and now I speak for those still unheard. Melania also stood, now facing her directly. You talk about noise, she said evenly. But sometimes people shout so much that no one listens. No, Jasmine countered. They shout because they've been ignored too long. We don't get to wait for the perfect moment. Either we speak or we disappear. Melania glanced toward the crew, but no one moved. This was no longer a show. It had become a reflection of privilege, and it wasn't easy to watch. I didn't come here to be attacked, Melania said finally. And I didn't come here to be interrupted, Jasmine replied steadily. Yet here we are. There was no shouting, just calm confrontation. Melania had entered expecting to correct a narrative. Instead, she was being confronted with the reality of silence versus accountability. I represent people who don't get second chances, Jasmine continued. People who can't enter rooms like this without being questioned or dismissed. So when you defend your silence, you're not just talking to me, you're speaking to everyone who's been punished for telling the truth. Melania didn't respond. For the first time, she looked unsettled, composed, yet unsure. Jasmine sat back down, turning to the host. Now, she said calmly, we can continue, unless Mrs. Trump wants to actually answer the question I began with. The host hesitated. Yes, let's continue. Melania didn't leave, but the room had shifted. Jasmine hadn't just stood her ground. She had drawn a line that Melania had unknowingly crossed. Melania remained standing, graceful but guarded. Her intended correction had turned into confrontation. Jasmine wasn't simply pushing back, she was demanding honesty. You don't understand, Melania said after a pause. It's easy to speak when the cameras treat you kindly. I was judged harshly no matter what I did. Jasmine leaned forward. You were judged, yes, but others lose their jobs, or their lives, for speaking out. You had global visibility and a communications team. Many would give anything for that. Melania walked to the edge of the set, resting a hand on a chair. You assume I had control, that I could say whatever I wanted. But you don't know the walls around me. You're right, Jasmine said. I don't know your walls, but I know mine. I know what it's like to enter rooms where I have to prove my worth again and again, not because of what I say, but because of who I am. So now we're comparing suffering? Melania asked quietly. No, Jasmine said. We're comparing choices. That hit home. This was no longer about politics. It was about lived experience. One woman had been expected to smile through power. The other had fought her way into it. Melania moved back toward the center of the set. I focused on kindness, she said softly. My Be Best initiative was about helping children, promoting respect. That mattered to me. Jasmine didn't dismiss it. Then why didn't we hear your voice when children were separated from their parents? Why not when your husband insulted entire communities? Be Best shouldn't just be a slogan. It's a responsibility. A flicker crossed Melania's face. Not guilt, not anger, but recognition. You think I didn't want to say more? She whispered. You think I wasn't screaming inside? Then you know how we feel, Jasmine said gently. We scream every day, when rights are stripped, when voices are ignored. The difference is we can't afford silence. Melania met her eyes, saying nothing. Jasmine continued, "You had the microphone. Every time you stayed quiet, that silence spoke for you. It's easier, yes, but others paid the price. Those people weren't sitting beside world leaders. They were in cages, hospitals, and on the streets." The studio was silent. Even the cameras seemed to hum more softly. "You think I didn't carry that with me?" Melania said finally, voice barely audible. "Then say it," Jasmine urged. Say it mattered. Say it still matters, and louder than ever before. For the first time, Melania's expression broke. A flicker of vulnerability appeared. "I regret some things," she said quietly. "I should have said more." It wasn't a full confession, but it was something. Jasmine nodded slowly. "Thank you. That's a start. No one had won. This wasn't a debate. It was an exchange between two women confronting the cost of silence and the weight of speaking out. It wasn't a spectacle or a staged moment. It was raw, unfiltered, and deeply human. In a space usually filled with rehearsed lines and tidy answers, something genuine emerged. Melania Trump had entered expecting to clarify her side of the story, but she was beginning to grasp something different. Speaking up doesn't make one a target. It creates accountability. And silence, even when meant to protect, forces others to bear its weight. Her quiet admission, "I should have said more," hung in the air like faint smoke after a long extinguished flame. The room didn't erupt in applause or chatter. It simply listened. And in that stillness, there was more substance than in any headline or press release she had ever known. Jasmine Crockett stood calmly, arms crossed, letting the silence breathe. "Regret," she said steadily, "isn't weakness. What matters is what you do with it next." Melania nodded, uncertain whether to respond or wait. For once, she wasn't in control of the setting. She simply occupied it. The interviewer cleared his throat, gently steering the discussion. "Congresswoman Crockett, what would you want to hear from someone like Mrs. Trump today? What does real accountability look like?" "Truth," Jasmine replied without hesitation. "Not rehearsed statements or partial apologies behind podiums. I want to hear someone say, 'I could have done better, and I will do better now, even if it's late.'" She met Melania's gaze. "Because late is better than never, but late demands action, not applause." Melania lowered her eyes, absorbing the words. "I was raised to be quiet," she said softly. "Where I come from, speaking too loudly could be dangerous. And when I married into this life, I thought silence might keep me safe. I understand," Jasmine said. "But safety for one can mean danger for many. When you're close to power, silence becomes a wall others must climb just to be heard." The interviewer stayed silent, aware of the fragile truth unfolding. Melania's voice dropped to a whisper. "There were nights I'd lie awake wondering if people misunderstood me, if they thought I didn't care." "They didn't misunderstand," Jasmine replied firmly but not unkindly. "They couldn't understand because you never let them." It was a shift, not dramatic, but steady, as years of unspoken tension began to unravel. This wasn't about image or policy anymore. It was about how privilege distances people from reality, leaving others to bear its consequences. Melania slowly took the seat across from Jasmine. "I thought I was protecting myself," she murmured. "But maybe I was protecting a world that didn't want to hear the truth." "That world still exists," Jasmine said. "But each time someone like you speaks honestly, you break a small piece of it away. You make space for others to speak too." Melania met her eyes. "And what about you? How do you keep speaking when they try to silence you?" Jasmine's expression didn't waver, because silence isn't an option I was ever given. "I either speak or I disappear, and I'm not disappearing." They sat quietly, neither enemies nor allies, but reflections of different kinds of pain, carrying different weights. "Maybe it's not too late," Melania said. "It never is," Jasmine replied. "If you're willing to act, not just talk." It was rare. Two women from opposite worlds, one shaped by poise and caution, the other by determination and resistance, finding a fragile thread of understanding. Not agreement, Not forgiveness, but recognition. And in a world of crafted statements, that was its own quiet revolution. No applause. No scripted cues, just truth. Though the cameras were still rolling, the moment no longer felt like television. It felt real. Jasmine leaned back, calm yet aware, while Melania sat opposite her, stripped of her practiced composure. No speechwriters. No handlers, just two women confronting reality without filters. The studio fell still. Even the crew paused, sensing something rare. Not a performance, but clarity. Melania's eyes drifted toward a young woman on the production team, wide-eyed, attentive. Perhaps she saw a younger version of herself, uncertain, unheard, learning how to find a voice. "I want to do better," Melania said finally. The words were slow, but honest, weighted with hesitation and sincerity. Jasmine studied her. She'd heard countless promises made for cameras, most forgotten afterward. But this moment felt different, not redemption, but authenticity. "You can start by listening," Jasmine said. "Not just to me, but to those you've never had to think about. The people who didn't grow up behind gates. The ones who can't afford to stay silent." Melania nodded. "I used to think neutrality was right. But now I see it protects the powerful and costs everyone else," Jasmine agreed quietly. The interviewer, who had stayed silent for much of the exchange, was about to speak when a voice from behind the set interrupted. When Melania Trump cut off Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett live on air, no one expected the firm and fearless response that followed. The former First Lady was visibly taken aback, and the audience sat stunned. The studio lights glowed warmly over the professional set. Congresswoman Crockett sat composed, her voice strong and deliberate, dissecting the idea of accountability. "The truth is," she said, "we can't keep pretending that silence doesn't benefit some people. When power shields the comfortable and punishes those who speak up, we have a real problem." The interviewer, an experienced host known for handling intense political debates, leaned forward to follow up. But before he could speak, a sharp voice cut through the studio. "Excuse me, stop right there." The interruption came not from the stage, but somewhere off camera. Producers jolted upright. Cameramen turned their heads. Even the usually calm studio staff froze. Jasmine Crockett's eyes narrowed as she looked toward the sound. From behind a sound curtain stepped Melania Trump, her heels echoing on the studio floor. Dressed in a sleek white pantsuit, she carried a calm expression that didn't match the charged atmosphere. Her presence immediately altered the room. This wasn't a planned visit. It was an interruption. Whether deliberate or impulsive, no one could tell, but it was clear. No one expected Melania Trump to appear unannounced during a live interview with a Democratic Congresswoman known for her sharp commentary. Momentarily thrown off, the interviewer cleared his throat. Mrs. Trump, you're not scheduled for today's program." Melania met his gaze. "No, I am not, but I was nearby, and I couldn't let that comment go unanswered." Jasmine remained composed, though her jaw tightened slightly. She turned toward Melania. "And what comment was that exactly?" Melania stepped closer, her hands clasped neatly. "You said silence protects power, that people like me benefited from it." "That's unfair." The studio fell silent, save for the hum of the lights and microphones picking up every sound. Jasmine spoke evenly. "My point was about systems, how silence, especially from those with immense influence, can become a tool of protection." "I understand what you meant," Melania replied, her accent soft but firm. "But you speak as if I chose comfort. You don't know what I sacrificed." Jasmine leaned in slightly. "Maybe I don't. But when you stand beside one of the most powerful men in the world and say nothing, as families are separated and women are disrespected, that silence becomes a choice." Melania paused. It wasn't anger that stopped her. It was the weight of Jasmine's directness. The host tried to mediate, but both women ignored him. "I've spent my career being interrupted, called emotional or too aggressive," Jasmine continued. "But I'm still here, speaking for every woman told to smile and stay quiet while injustice unfolded." Melania straightened. "I did what I thought was right. And so am I," Jasmine answered. The tension shifted from awkward to electric. Two women from vastly different backgrounds, both shaped by public judgment, now faced each other live and unfiltered. The crew stood frozen. Everyone sensed this was no scripted exchange. It was genuine confrontation. The interviewer hesitated, unsure how to proceed. Jasmine lifted a hand to stop him. "I'm not going to be spoken over today," she said firmly. "Not by a man, and certainly not by you, Mrs. Trump." Melania raised an eyebrow but stayed calm. "I'm not here to argue. I just wanted to respond to something unfair." "Unfair," Jasmine replied, her smile thin. "That's an interesting word from someone who held one of the most privileged positions in the world and said almost nothing for 4 years." "I spoke when the time was right," Melania countered. "Really?" Jasmine asked. "Was it not the right time when families were torn apart at the border? When women were mocked, veterans insulted, or a black president's citizenship questioned? How many right times did you let pass?" The silence grew heavier. This wasn't just a disagreement. It was a reckoning between two figures divided by power, race, and experience. Melania's composure held, but her fingers tightened. "You don't know what I endured. I was attacked for everything. My accent, my past." "I'm not saying that was right," Jasmine replied, rising from her chair. "But when you have a platform that big, silence stops being protection. It becomes complicity." The air thickened as Jasmine took a step forward, calm but resolute. "I grew up in a country where people like me were told to stay quiet. I didn't. I ran for office. I speak for those still unheard." Melania also stood, now face to face with her. "You speak of noise," she said evenly, "but sometimes noise drowns meaning." "No," Jasmine replied sharply. "People raise their voices because they've been ignored too long. We don't have the luxury of waiting for perfect timing. We speak or we disappear." Melania glanced toward the crew, perhaps seeking reassurance. None came. The set had transformed into a reflection of privilege and accountability, and it was uncomfortable to watch. "I didn't come here to be attacked," Melania finally said. "And I didn't come here to be interrupted," Jasmine replied steadily. "But here we are." This wasn't chaos. It was controlled confrontation. Melania may have entered to defend her silence, but she now stood challenged by someone unafraid to call out the difference between silence and survival. "I represent people who don't get second chances," Jasmine said. "People who can't walk into rooms like this without being doubted or dismissed. When you defend your silence, you speak to everyone told they were too much for speaking truth." Melania didn't respond. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Jasmine calmly returned to her seat. "Now," she said, turning to the host, "we can continue, unless Mrs. Trump would like to answer the question I was addressing." The host blinked, still processing. Yes, let's continue." Melania stayed on set, but the dynamic had shifted. Jasmine had drawn a line, and Melania had stepped across it unprepared. The former First Lady remained standing, graceful but visibly unsettled. What began as a correction had become a confrontation. And Jasmine Crockett wasn't merely pushing back. She was demanding accountability from someone who had long avoided it. "I don't think you understand," Melania said finally.